Well, here's the final video for the oil cooling system. This has been one of the more difficult things I've done on the car. Oil system and remote power steering reservoir. So here's the completed oil system. You can see it starts down at the two blue fittings at the engine, and the send from the engine comes up, plugs into the oil thermostat, and the oil thermostat sends it back to the remote filter housing. It's just running straight through here, and I set it up where it's not touching anything. The trick here is to use the rounded fittings. You don't want any sharp 90-degree bends, because that'll screw up your oil pressure and block flow. This was the most difficult part. So from the cooler, from the thermostat, we're sending out of the top. And there's the holes I got in the firewall. So we're sending out of the top into the bottom of the cooler down there, because Fluidyne said send it in the bottom and come out of the top. They said that'll prevent air bubble issues. And then it's returning out of the top into the bottom of the thermostat. Those are two 45-degree fittings. So I don't know. I hope this works. It's basically it's having a blood transfusion. All the oil comes out of the engine through this system into the cooler. There it is. Into the cooler and back into the engine. And that's pretty intense. As far as the, let me put the radiator back. So now to the power steering setup. I had Lee Performance remove the reservoir from the power steering pump and put AN fittings. It's a 10 AN return and it's a 6 AN send. Now you notice the fitting on the 6 AN send is a little different. That's a compression fitting and a Teflon lined hose, because that's a high pressure line. And you can see it's going into the steering box with a 45-degree angle. So that's the only line I use with compression fittings. The rest is Earl's Speed Flex swivel seal hose, swivel seal, or Speed Flex hose, swivel seal ends. But what you can see here is that once it leaves the gearbox, it comes up along here and into, you can barely see it, I'll show it to you, into a cooler, and it goes into the bottom of the cooler, and then it comes out of the top of the cooler into the remote reservoir. Now I had to mount the reservoir there because I had to have hood clearance. There was nowhere on the firewall I could mount it. And if I removed the battery and mounted it to this little, you can see there's a bulkhead there on the core support, it would be lower than the power steering pump. And you can already see the way it's mounted. I had to come out of the bottom and then with a 120-degree fitting come back up to the power steering pump. This pressure, Lee said, this system, Lee said it was under about 10 pounds of pressure, so it should push it out of the bottom and back into the pump, no problem. But I had to mount it the way I did so I can get hood clearance. You can see here's the hood stopper, and then up there the little black rubber bumper on the white fender, the hood comes down to that line. So you can see I'm just under the hood with it mounted there. Now, as far as the power steering cooler, this is necessary because if you're doing autocross or road racing, it'll just boil your fluid. And I've heard some guys, the solder actually getting so hot it melted and their reservoir just came off their power steering pump. So you have to have a cooler if you're doing road racing. These cars were designed for quarter mile and that's it. For extended use you have to have coolers. Now this is actually a Durali, it's a frame rail transmission cooler. And they said for what I'm doing, they don't recommend their power steering coolers. For racing, they said, look, just put the frame rail transmission cooler up there. And so you can see that is a long, it almost goes the length of my radiator. And it's pretty basic. There you go. 2 AN fittings. And it's very light, and it's bolted to the radiator. Not bolted, see those little black dots there? Those are just zip ties that are made to push through the radiator, and then they have clips on the back to hold it. So I've had a lot of luck with that, but my concern with this setup, both the oil system and the power steering system, is the torque of the engine. So this engine has the rubber mounts in it, and because the steel mounts that I ordered would not fit, I could not get them to line up. So it has, oh, you can't see, it's right under that header. There's the rubber mount. So when you get on it, the engine does twist. So I'm concerned, is that twisting just going to rip that fitting or rip the cooler, rip the reservoir off? Or see, I just don't know how much it's going to twist down at that low. If you're at top of the engine, you get, an inch or two of movement. But as you move down, basically the fulcrum point of your twist is lower. So I'm hoping that's going to, the torque and twist of the engine is not going to stress that. I think the tube could, the tube does, braided line does flex, and it can be pulled on a little bit. So I'll just have to monitor that. The other area where I'm concerned about that is on the compression. The bottom of the engine is actually going to go towards the ground on this side. It comes up in the air on that side and pushes down, compresses towards the ground this side. So those fittings in the oil cooler are going to pull downwards. I don't even know if this is going to be an issue. I'm just thinking of everything. So you can see there's a little slack in here. So I think we'll be good. You can see there is a little slack, and we're only, again, that's down near where the fulcrum point of the twist would happen, so it's not going to twist as much as it does at the top of the engine. Anyway, there's the completed setup. Now I just got to figure out how to fill it with oil and how to tell how much oil is in it. I know it's a 7-quart pan, so I'll put 7 quarts in, and then I think what I can do here is remove the temperature sending unit plug and get a little funnel and pour some oil into the cooler. So that way I'll have, that looks like it might hold 1 or 2 quarts, probably 2 quarts. I'll pop this line off, pour, half quart into the thermostat, and I'll pour a quart into the filter. So then all these items will be filled with oil, and there'll be 7 quarts in the pan. And then all that has to happen is the air needs to be pushed out of the lines. So, man, it's starting to rain out there. I got to get the GTO inside. Anyway, it's going to be a learning experience. I've got the gauges, some electric gauges, and I've had a custom pod made, and the 2 5/8 water temperature, oil temperature, and then here's there we go. There's my oil pressure. So I've got all the gauges needed. I still got to plug in the lines there. I put a small fuse box under the dash. It's like a 6-input fuse box about the size of a mobile phone, and it's just plugged into a hot wire. I disconnected the radio and plugged that into the fuse box so I can plug in my gauges to the fuse box and fuse the gauges. The oil pressure is mechanical, though. It doesn't require electricity. The temperature ones are electric because I could not reach the engine with the mechanical gauges. You can't get one with a long enough temperature copper line. So here's, I did blue for water, yellow for oil, and you can see the sender for the oil. It's right there. And the yellow line I plug in, and then I'm going to plug the blue line up here into the water sender. Now what's cool, I also have my stock 1970 style sender, so the dash sender still works. And since I used a sandwich adapter, I still have a plug-in for the original oil pressure sender on the original oil filter housing, so my oil pressure stock gauge will work. So all the stock gauges will work, and the aftermarket gauges will be there. So the car is, you know, other than a couple of holes in the fender well, inner fender, the biggest mod I've ever done on this car is cutting the 2 holes right there. It comes from the factory with that hole, but I cut those 2 holes. Everything else on the car is bolted on, and all the original parts are in the basement, so you know, in 20 years I could just put this car back to bone stock. There's actually the original Ram Air 3 engine, and it's under the radiator shroud, which I'm putting the radiator shroud. There's the Quadrajet Ram Air 3. It's got 87,000 miles on it. It's never been apart. So that's pretty cool. It was running when I bought the car. There it is, Ram Air 3, numbers matching. And yeah, it was running when I got the car. That's I drove it for a couple of days before I started the teardown. So only thing left now is throw the transmission in and hook up some of the accessories. And Virginia International Raceway is having the NASA's having an event up there. October 4th and 5th, and the Vintage Outlaw series will be running. Those are the 1975 and older cars. And I don't have my competition license yet, but I'll be doing the HPDE events. So yeah, if you're in that area, you want to see the car, October 4th and 5th at VIR, Virginia International Raceway. And I'm going to go get that GTO in. It's raining. Thanks for watching.